Today I saw an article on my favorite news site, and it gives me the opportunity to talk about a larger issue, and that larger issue is Jana Hensel. Well, she's not the largest girl they have, but she's also a feminist. So today I want to talk about Jana Hensel. She is the voice of East Germany. That's the way she sells herself. She has written a number of books and also writes columns for various newspapers. And her national career, so to say, started in 1990 when the communist paper Der Freitag was founded. Now, Der Freitag does not admit to be communist, as most communists don't admit it. Also in America, they always call themselves progressives. They just start to call themselves communists when they gain power. Then it becomes very obvious. Until then, it is everything. It is socialism. It is just fairness or being nice and cuddly and all of this. But when they have control, then it's communism. And but before that, it is everything else. So Jana Hensel took a job at Der Freitag, which was long held by Jakob Augstein, one of the most dangerous anti-Semites according to the Simon Wiesenthal Center. He is also an outspoken critic of Israel and thinks that a kippah is a provocation and tweets about it. Now, Jana Hensel had written for Mr. Augstein for a couple of years, but left the paper in 2014 to move to a more respectable paper, or let's say a larger one. And that one is, of course, Zeit. From my perspective, there is no paper that is more to the left than the Zeit. It just managed to drape a shroud over their ambitions a little bit here and there. They respect America as an authority, but they also rebel against it, and by and large, they try to create a mood against Western nations, and that's also generally true for Israel. Let's say 80% is anti-Western, anti-Israel, anti-American, and 20% is then this, being a fraud to their own readers, so they can pretend to be somewhere in the middle. Or to be fair, and they can always point to these articles when somebody is asking questions why they are obviously against Western values. Now, Jana Hensel is working for this paper, and among her great jewels that she had produced is an article whitewashing Erich Honecker. She called it Erich währt am längsten, which translates to Erich remains the longest. That is a wordplay on the German proverb honesty will prevail, or honesty will remain the longest. And as the title suggests, it is basically a praise of Erich Honecker. Erich Honecker was the dictator of the communistic regime in the second half of its existence, and his reign is usually considered to be less extreme than that of his predecessor Walter Ulbricht. She takes that to play down the gravity of the entire injustice, and of course she pays a lot of lip service on that there were political imprisonments, there was all this stuff, but this is how the side operates in general. As I have mentioned, they will always pay lip service a bit to pro-Americanism and be a bit critical of some communist regimes here and there, but ultimately they will play it down incredibly. And this is very different from the regimes that the alleged conservatives have a connection to. We would never play down Hitler or Pinochet. This is something that only the left does. The left plays down violent regimes. Jana Hensel is the example of Christa Wolf, who was a writer, an author, a poet, and much acclaimed in East Germany until the fall of the wall. Now, Miss Wolf protested against the extradition of regime critic Wolf Biermann, and this she takes as an example that even though people were part of the regime or were playing by their rules, were members of the party, they still were rebellious against it. The reality, though, and that is even mentioned in the very same text, is that Christa Wolf worked for the Stasi. So that is a very bad example, isn't it? And this is how Jana Hensel operates. She tries to say, yes, there is actually something bad. There was injustice. There were political prisoners. There was people shot in the back when they left. There were people tortured. Okay. But and then she tries to portray everybody as being harmless, and talks about an unfair assessment of the dictatorship in the aftermath. And as an example, she says that only 2% were giving information to the Stasi, and that it would be paranoid if you would suspect to be found out by these 2%. That's 2 in 100 people, or 1 in every 50 people. Just imagine how many people you see in the streets every day, how many people there are in every bus, how many people there are fit in a room. 1 in 50 people reporting everything to the Stasi is an all-controlling force. And even though she gives that number, she just plays it down. Don't worry, it's just every 1 in 50 people spying on you. So why are you so paranoid, huh? And so today she had written another article about how we are all in danger of being overrun by right-wing extremists and so on. And also she sees some hope that the democratic parties rise up against it. And she starts by saying, interestingly enough, that in 2015 the uprising began. So somehow conservatives or the right decided just like that maybe they should protest against the political left, as if nothing had happened. She does actually mention the opening of the border, or as she says, the not closing of the border. But also she does not mention Charlie Hebdo, the Paris attack. I mean, there was a lot going on in 2015 that made people very angry. And it was not just that these things happened, but the entire reaction to it, the media class, the politicians that sided suddenly with jihadists who talked about blasphemy laws being legitimate. There was a lot 2015 that made people really angry, and she pretends that there was just this one decision that people feel unhappy about, and therefore some dark side of Germany were shown ever since. And not just Angela Merkel's decision is criticized. She says that those who protest against her are against the system. And this is a propaganda tool that she is exploiting that was laid already before her, namely that everybody is against democracy if he or she disagrees with her, and or that all conservatives are somewhat against democracy. And as a code, as a dog whistle for being against democracy is complaining about any given system. So if you say I'm against the media meeting up with Angela Merkel in secret, and I'm against the system of the party leaders handpicking the lists of those who can be elected for parliament, and so on and so on, they will say that you're not just referring to a specific system, but against democracy itself. This is a slide trick they are exploiting since a couple of years, and she also does that in this text. Then she goes on to say that in the last years, in 2015, there was a right-wing shift going on, and the left now has to react against it. That is the premise of her story. That there was this, this sudden rise of the political right, and the left, the poor victims, they have now to react to it. And the left does not just have to react to the right, but somehow also to National Socialism. Because when she continues to talk about AfD, Pegida, and all the other conservative groups that she mentions, she goes on to say that our memory culture has somewhat changed, and we are not taking the memory of the National Socialism seriously. She claims that everybody thinks his own grandfather or his own grandmother were not involved in the oppression of the Nazi regime. There's one thing I really wanted to know from Ms. Hensel, and that is, what did actually her grandfather do? What did her grandmother do? It is so slick that I see these leftists always pointing their fingers on everybody else, but it's strange enough, it's always white people, and it's always, well, not always white people. There are a lot of activists who are colored and gay and do belong to minorities, but there is a surprising number of white people, hectoring everybody else on how everybody else shall remember cruel times and be ashamed of their forefathers. But what is specifically about her grandfather, and did she love him? And what did actually Jana Hensel do during the Rwanda genocide or something else? Did she pick up a gun? Did she fight racism? I mean, real racism, not just that nonsense that the left is talking about all day long. What does actually Jana Hensel do to fight actual racism as it occurs all around the world, mostly in Muslim countries? A lot of these people on the left, they point their dirty fingers on American and British and French soldiers who actually do something and risk their lives to protect and save other people. Yet they want accuse everybody else for not being too critical with their grandparents who have not done enough against the injustice of their time. Well, why don't you do more against the injustice of your time and not just your activism rubbish, but why don't you go and fight? Of course, the overall topic of her piece is that the country is turning everything around now. She is full of hope, and she says that the country would face these ugly realizations and truth and fight them. And this is so crazy. This is a real translation. I'm not making this up. Fight the realization and truth. It's not just that she wants to fight conservatives and those who she believes are Nazis, which seems to be the same, but also the ugly realizations and the truth itself. And she confirms this by saying that, yes, she wants a new, or she sees even that happening, the creation of a new reality, and that can be said with that pathos, as she says, for a modern image of Germany, maybe even a new German identity. That is what she claims is going to happen. So it's not just she's basically fighting the truth. She's fighting reality. She does not accept the culture as is, and basically everybody has his say. Nobody is happy with his contemporaries. I also have a lot of criticism. I do this channel for my criticism, but her shtick is that she wants to create something completely new out of from scratch, basically. Well, I just have this or that correction to make. I have dropped a lot of videos by now, but I have not yet talked about any of these things she prides herself with, and that I will have to explain now. Brandenburg, the state of Brandenburg, introduces gender parity on electoral lists. As I said, electoral lists are compiled by the party leaders and determine who can be voted. And Brandenburg is now forcing the party leaders to pick one female for each male they nominate for the parliament. So in the result, Brandenburg State Parliament will have as many men as women in future. So not the electorate gets the choice of who should run, who should be selected for the office. No, it is. I mean, it had been the party leaders before, which is, it's a bug, not a feature, and it's even now that you cannot even decide what sex should there be in this or that office. And quite frankly, I would like. I mean, policing is a task of the state. I would actually like a man to run the police. I think I sound very sexist here, but I think women have worse risk assessment ability than men. I think women are quite bad at assessing risks correctly, and everything that has to do with police and military and so on is usually better in the hands of a man. There are exceptions to this. Maggie Thatcher was a great exception, for example. I think Nikki Haley is. But by and large, this is the case. Women shriek when they see a mouse, men don't. Not every woman does shriek, but you get the picture. It is how it is. The second thing she is happy about is that the leader of the Social Democratic Youth Wing, Kevin Kühnert, calls for the nationalization and expropriation of car manufacturers like BMW and also of other companies. And I haven't even mentioned this before, and I thought I could make an entire video about expropriation mania, because we have actually protests now in our streets that ask for the expropriation of builders, of housing companies and so on, so that people can buy cheaper homes. At least that's what socialists seem to hope. Whenever the state does something, the costs should miraculously drop. That's a false hope, but somehow they have it. And Kevin Kühnert does not only want flats and houses to be controlled entirely, the entire market be controlled by the government, but also the car manufacturers. And she sees that as a good thing. And the idea of socialism is discussed openly again, and it is not, the socialists don't have to be ashamed anymore. Oh my goodness. The third thing she is happy about is that Fridays for Future would shape the public opinion on climate change. I hope that is not even true. I don't know. Then she says, and this is not a joke, I will quote now a translation: women and new men, or in other words, feminists and she feminists, or he feminists and she feminists shape the debates. So they are the loud voices in the debate. Many new books deal with feminism, racism, right-wing networks, and the reality of post-communist East German reality. Now, I see everything as a problem. I hate the emasculation. I hate this constant accusations of racism. I hate that freedom of association, a basic human right, is not respected. I hate that post-communist life in East Germany is presented as being worse than it was when people were actually locked away for disagreements. And she goes on to say, in other words, that what I just said, in other words, minorities are demanding their rights. The climate change is hardly the climate change crisis is hardly disputed. I have a big problem that the climate crisis or climate change crisis is hardly disputed, and this comes from a man who is neither a climate denier nor a climate change denier, not even a man-made climate change denier. I am none of these things, but I am a climate change crisis denier. I absolutely don't see how I have even a dog in that fight. I am pro-nuclear power plants. If you don't like coals, build modern power plants, for Christ's sake. And you can also simply relax about the problem because it will go away. After the man-made heating, what I expect is a man-made cooling, because with CRISP and other genetic manipulation technologies that are coming up right now, a lot of areas that are now deserts will probably be made arable in future. So there is a lot of space that currently cannot be inhabited by plants as they are, because they are not robust. They don't have the waxing on the leaves and so on. That will most likely be used for farming in the future, and that has an enormous effect on the climate. It will cause a lot of rain in this area. It's not just CO2 being turned into oxygen. It is really about the moisture that's coming to these arid areas. So I see the entire problem actually going away quite naturally. And outside of that, as I've mentioned, if you don't like to burn coal, build nuclear plants. And another thing that she sees as a great plus, the turnaround of these evil events, is that the right-wing revolt, as she calls it, that suddenly came from 2015, is better understood, and the knowledge about it is wider spread. And if you go to conservative sites, and there are not many and they are small, but they will usually say they suffer a fear of a denunciation wherever they go. They cannot speak freely in their families, or sometimes they cannot speak freely among their friends. Many people lose friends. I have lost friends. They cannot speak, leave alone the workplace, the public. People are afraid, and this is what she calls people, getting better informed. There are actually brochures that are there to identify supposed Nazis, and what they use as identify is, of course, something that does not identify Nazis. It is rather identifying conservatives. They are not so busy identifying anti-Semites, and as I said, Jana Hensel worked for one of the most prolific anti-Semites, according to the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So that was it for today, and I see you. Bye.